12 hours away from a TTC strike deadline. Nearly 12,000 transit workers are set to walk off the job overnight if a deal isn't reached. We'll be joined live by TTC spokesperson Stuart Green coming up.
One person's dead following a hit and run on Roncesvalles near Dundas.
And Toronto is marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day with a ceremony at Coronation Park. Olivia Chow in attendance. We'll have more on that coming up.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latafat. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. The union representing thousands of TTC workers says there is still plenty of work to be done at the bargaining table before a deal can be reached. It also says members are ready to strike, and that would completely shut down transit as of tomorrow morning.
CP24's Courtney Hills joins us live with the latest on the talks. And Courtney, you are at the Sheraton Hotel. Let's talk about the significance of that location as well.
Well, this is where the ATU Local 113 bargaining team and the TTC, they are trying to work out a deal. These talks are happening as we speak. Of course, the hope is they will be able to come up with a deal. But what we're hearing from the union, it doesn't sound like they're close to one. And they're warning if they don't get a good deal by midnight, they are going to walk, saying there will be no TTC service right across the city. No subway, no buses. This is going to have a huge impact. What we heard from the ATU Local 113 president earlier, saying they're at a major impasse here, also saying there's a major problem when it comes to negotiating. They feel the TTC is just not bargaining. They say they're making offers with strings attached. They also said they have concerns when it comes to job security, more specifically with contract work, saying they feel the TTC is trying to contract work out and they're fighting to make sure that doesn't happen. We'll let you hear from the president, who talked earlier about what they have to, how they feel that is about this fight they're now taking on.
Their bargaining is, though, we do not have the right to strike. I can assure you, we fought long and hard for that right to strike. We have it back. It is not a reckless thing that we have back. We fought for it. We beat the provincial government not once. We beat the provincial government twice. We actually had to win an appellate court a couple weeks ago and take back that right to strike, which never should have been taken in the first place. That has impaired bargaining, not just for this cycle, it's impaired bargaining for a number of cycles, and that's why our members are pissed off and voted 98% to have a strike mandate.
So you heard there, the union representing these close to 12,000 TTC workers, they are ready to walk if they don't have a good deal. We've also reached out to the TTC for comment on what the union has to say about the negotiating process. What they're telling us, they believe enough progress is being made at the bargaining table and goodwill that will mean they will reach an agreement without any job action. That is the hope in all of this, guys. We know the union hoping that they are able to strike a deal. The TTC is hoping that. People out on the street are hoping that, because this is going to have a significant impact tomorrow. If people are relying on the TTC to get to work, to school, to get their kids to daycare, to go anywhere, basically, there will not be the option of the TTC, of transit in this system, in this city, if they do in fact walk. So the latest out of Sheridan, these two sides are talking. Some consider that good news, but we are hearing from the union saying if they don't get that deal, they will be off the job as of midnight. For the timeline, for anyone who's curious about that, who might rely on transit tonight, they would be officially on strike at 12:01 a.m., but they say they will continue service to ensure that anybody still on a bus or a subway can still get home. They say that's a priority for them to make sure people can get where they need to go. But by 2 a.m., that's it. Over to you.
Okay, and we'll be speaking with TTC Stuart Green a little bit later on during CP24 Live at Noon. But for now, CP24's Courtney Hills. Thank you. Well, the federal government says that the union representing border employees needs to meet in the middle to avoid a strike. Mediated negotiations between the two sides are ongoing as the 4 p.m. deadline looms. The federal government says that it is prepared to make concessions, but says there needs to be movement on both sides. Despite a vast majority of frontline border services officers being labeled essential, a work-to-rule action would still cause disruptions at the border.
Well, police are investigating a fatal hit and run in the West End today. This happened around 5:15 this morning on Roncesvalles near Dundas. Paramedics say one person was pronounced dead at the scene. Police say the victim is male, but no word on an age. Stay with us for the latest.
A Canadian ceremony was held at Juno Beach in France today to mark D-Day. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was joined by the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister of France.
The trio attended the Juno Beach Center, which is a permanent memorial to the Canadians who served in the Second World War, and laid wreaths of remembrance on the beach. There were multiple performances by Canadian singers and bands, as well as youth speeches.
80 years ago, more than 14,000 Canadians landed at Juno Beach among the roughly 150,000 Allied forces who came ashore in Normandy. These soldiers had friends and family. They had lives and jobs before the war started. On the battlefields, Francophones, Anglophones, Indigenous peoples, and new Canadians came together as one. Brave Canadians like you sacrificed everything for our freedom.
We continue to honor every Canadian who gave so much, every Canadian family who lost a loved one, every Canadian who lived with the scars of battle, both physical and mental. I want to thank you, our veterans, for your extraordinary acts of bravery and sacrifice on Juno Beach and the liberation of Europe. All of you demonstrated heroism and determination that ensured fascism was conquered.
Prime Minister Trudeau spent time with each of the 13 surviving Second World War veterans who made the journey to France for D-Day. The oldest veteran at the ceremony is 104 years old. 381 Canadian soldiers died on the first day of the invasion in Normandy.
And prior to the ceremony, there was a spectacular display from the Canadian Armed Forces parachute team, the Skyhawks. They landed on Juno Beach to applause from the crowd. And CTV National's Joy Malvin joined us live from Juno Beach with some of the stories of the Canadian veterans.
All week we've been speaking to many of the veterans, and you have to remember there's only 13 elderly veterans who made the trip back to France. They're in their late 90s and hundreds, and just sharing some of the memories of that particular day. I'm thinking of General Richard Romer, who flew reconnaissance missions over Juno Beach to make sure that the German fighters wouldn't, start firing on Canadian troops who were storming Juno Beach. Just yesterday, speaking with the Regina Rifle Regiment, they were unveiling a statue of that very day where they lost 102 people just within moments of landing on the beach.
Locally, let's go live right now to Coronation Park. This is where Mayor Olivia Chow is attending a D-Day commemoration service.
They were young as we were young. They served, giving freely of themselves. To them we pledge, amid the winds of time, to carry their torch and never forget. We will remember them. We will remember them. If I could ask the Consul General of Britain to come forward, please, to read In Flanders Fields.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard, amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Captain Navy Timothy O'Leary of HMCS York, Royal Canadian Navy, to speak about today's invasion.
Please have a seat. Your Honor, Consuls General, distinguished guests, veterans, c'est un vrai plaisir pour moi et les membres de vos forces canadiennes d'être ici parmi vous aujourd'hui. When we commemorate this remarkable achievement by the Allied forces as a part of the noble victory over a terrible evil, it's easy to disconnect with the actual people involved and make it an arbitrary and esoteric discussion about the numbers. And we could talk about the 15,000 Canadian soldiers who landed on Juno Beach 80 years ago today, or the 10,000 sailors of the Royal Canadian Navy who manned 109 warships and landing craft to transport them safely across the English Channel, or the 15 squadrons of the Royal Canadian Air Force who protected them and fought the battle in the skies. But for those of us who grew up in Toronto, Coronation Park looked a little different, because there used to be a Sherman tank right over there, and 2 artillery pieces next to a Lancaster bomber. And Her Majesty's Canadian ship Haida, a destroyer that guarded the western approaches of the invasion force, was tied up just there at Ontario Place. And they weren't here as examples of the technology of war. They were here because the city of Toronto had a very real part in the Second World War, including the beaches at Normandy. There were no streets in Toronto that were free of families that didn't have someone serving in uniform or working in war production. Liberty Village, the candy factory, was turned into a Bren gun factory. And the Lancaster bomber that was built here was constructed in Malton, where Pearson Airport is now. And in Scarborough, 20,000 people built ammunition in a factory there. I was very fortunate that I had 3 great uncles who were Canadian minesweepers clearing the way for the invasion fleet, and 3 more who went ashore with the army at Juno Beach. Everyone in the city was connected with the invasion of Normandy, and I cannot imagine nor express the relief they must have felt at finally, in the wake of Dieppe and other failures, getting troops ashore to help the liberation of France and other European countries. So as we commemorate these heroes today, I would encourage that we remember them as people who lived in the streets, who played in this park, who swam in this lake, and sometimes who hoped that the rain would hold off a little longer. Miigwech, merci.
Lance Corporal Leonard Craig enlisted with the Queen's Own Rifles, 17th of June 1940 in Toronto. After training at Camp Borden in Sussex, New Brunswick, he arrived in the United Kingdom with the regiment on 29 July 1941. He participated in training for the next 3 years and was appointed to Lance Corporal in April of that year. Lance Corporal Craig landed on Juno Beach with B Company on the first wave of D-Day and was killed in action. He's buried at Bonney-sur-Mer Canadian War Cemetery in Normandy. He left behind his wife, Mary, daughter, Barbara, and son, Donald. We are honored to have his son Donald here, who won't speak today, but I do have his grandson, Andrew Craig, available to speak. Please welcome Andrew Craig.
Thank you for letting me speak about my grandfather today. I appreciate it. B63890, Lance Corporal Leonard James Craig, born 24 November 1911 in Ayr, Scotland, son of Margaret Youngson. Married Mary Harvey McCaig on 29 August 1931, right here in Toronto, Ontario. Had 2 children, Barbara and Donald. His son, my father, who is here today, and is 91 years of age, and has never missed a Remembrance Day or other commemorations since June 6, 1944. As was stated before, my grandfather enlisted proudly in the Queen's Own Rifles on 17 June 1940 and had previous militia service in 1931 with the Royal Grenadiers. His epitaph reads, "Lovingly remembered by wife Mary, daughter Barbara, and son Donald, Queen's Own Rifles fallen D-Day." I'm very fortunate to have visited my grandfather's resting place at the Canadian War Cemetery in Benny-sur-Mer, France, a number of years ago. I proudly placed all of his medals and the letters he wrote to my father on his headstone and took many photos to share with my family. I know it pained my father to see those photos. Having said that, I hope that it gave him some sense of peace. I spent many hours on the beaches of Normandy, specifically Juno, trying to imagine what occurred there 80 years ago. I proudly have a small amount of sand from Juno Beach and think about my grandfather's sacrifice daily. While at the Canadian War Cemetery at Benny-sur-Mer, which overlooks Juno Beach, I remember the calm I felt in thinking about the final resting place of all these fallen heroes. I am proud to carry his name, B63890, Lance Corporal Leonard James Craig, remembered daily, loved daily, hero. We will remember them.
All right, you've been watching a moving D-Day commemoration ceremony in Coronation Park this hour on the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. The City of Toronto honoring the Canadian soldiers who served, who sacrificed so much for our collective freedom. A moment of silence for the fallen, along with some really powerful speeches there. Mayor Olivia Chow in attendance, along with some dignitaries and a number of veterans. We will have more on this ceremony coming up throughout the day right here on CP24.
And we're less than 12 hours away from a TTC strike deadline. Nearly 12,000 transit workers are set to walk off the job overnight if a deal is not reached.
And for the latest on this and all eyes on the story, we're joined live by Stuart Green, the TTC's Senior Communications Advisor. Thank you for joining us. A lot of people are watching this. And look, this is down to the wire. If a strike does, in fact, happen, Toronto would be paralyzed. Let me begin by getting your thoughts on the union's comments this morning. They say that there is a major problem with negotiations. Let's watch.
We're tired of talking. I guess there's progress in their minds. Maybe they know where their end point's going to be. It'd be nice if they enlightened us. We're at the table trying to get a deal, and if they know something that we don't, bring it to the table. That's the problem. Whoever is giving the direction, in whichever way, bring it to the table. Thoughts and great consideration for what might happen, well, it's happening right now. And we need the TTC to provide everything at the table now because the clock is ticking. But the clock is ticking on them, not us. We've defined what we're doing. We are walking. Tomorrow you will not have transit service. So if there's something in the background that's going to happen and people know behind the scenes what is available to us, it'd be nice if they let us know.
So Marvin Alfred, they're pretty frustrated. Also accusing the TTC of not bargaining in good faith and making offers with strings attached. I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
So I want to start by saying that, being at the table is a very important place to be during any labor negotiation. That's where you want to be. That's where you want to have your discussion, your dialogue. You want to hash out the issues. We absolutely understand Marvin's position. It's the first time we were speaking before we just went on air. It's the first time in many years they've had the right to exercise the right to strike, and they're flexing that muscle. And we understand why. They've got some issues they want to resolve, and that's fair. But what I will say, though, is that we're still at the table with them. The talks are productive and progressive. I would point to things like the side deals that we reached about Wheel-Trans. We know that if, in the event that there is a job disruption, there would be Wheel-Trans service 100%, fully continued. The union agreed to that, which is great. They also last night agreed to they wouldn't leave anyone stranded in service. So if you were on the TTC tonight into tomorrow morning and they were to go on strike at, say, midnight or just after, service would continue about 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. So this is the kind of progress that we've been able to make. Sure, there are still some issues to resolve, but we are optimistic and we think there's some goodwill. I would just also point out that we settled 3 other union contracts this year, with 2 of which were CUPE locals, and they are tough negotiators.
And Stuart, just for clarification, because it seems like there's a couple different messages here. TTC Chair Jamal Meyer saying that he's confident an agreement's going to be reached. The union is saying you guys are still very, very far apart. So what's actually going on? Like, what does this look like?
So, I'm not at the table. I'm here with you. Our CEO is at the table. We are very much involved in these negotiations. We're very serious about this. We do not want a labor disruption. I don't think the union wants one either. Nobody in Toronto certainly wants one because we know it would inconvenience millions of people. We're head down. We're negotiating. They have some issues that they want resolved, and we have to talk through them. But I will say that as long as you're at the table, anytime you're at the table, that's a good place to be, and it means that progress is being made. Even if the union feels frustrated that it's slow, we believe that it is being made, and we think we're going to get there. It may not be right at midnight. We may push beyond the midnight deadline, as we saw with the last CUPE negotiation, but we do think we'll get there.
You think you're going to get there?
We will.
You sound optimistic, and you say that talks are progressing well. As Bakari noted, the union is painting a really different picture, saying you're actually at an impasse. You understand why that might be confusing for riders. How do you explain that to people who just want to know if they're going to be able to get to work tomorrow morning?
Yeah, I think, in the world of communications, I think Marvin is speaking to a slightly different audience. We're speaking to our customers. He may be speaking to his members. He has a slightly different tone about him. But look, the bottom line is that everybody is committed to the deal. They're at the table, we're at the table, and that's where you need to be. That's the only way you reach a resolution. We believe that we're close, but there are some things that we will have to work out. It's going to be at least until midnight tonight before we get this resolved.
Okay.
And so you did make mention of this, but just kind of lay this out for us. Let's say the strike is not averted. What is actually going to happen with the trains that are moving, people who are maybe on a bus? Walk us through this.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So first of all, our advice to people is that if you absolutely have to travel tonight, if you have a job that requires you to be out at or around midnight, if you've got an event later on this evening and you're planning your trip home after that, maybe start looking at alternatives. I appreciate it's not a great message, but we have to be honest. There is a chance that there could be a labor disruption. If that happens, there's no TTC service, but as I mentioned earlier, we've got a side agreement with the union that we struck yesterday that ensures no one is left stranded. And you heard Marvin talk about this during his news conference as well. Everybody's committed to, in the event of a strike, people will get to where they're going, or at least get to an interchange point like a subway station or something where maybe they can get picked up. But and that's important because we don't want people being stranded out in the street. Marvin said the exact same thing. So that's important for the customers to have that confidence. But of course, we hope we don't have to get there.
We are hearing from the advocacy group TTC riders this hour reacting, saying that it's outrageous that the TTC hasn't been able to reach a deal with the union. Is it fair to put riders in the city through something like this?
Well, we have a mandate from our board, and our board is predominantly city councillors and some citizen members. They've given us a mandate. We're only able to bargain within that mandate, and that's what we're doing. So, we think that there's enough room there to find an agreement and a settlement. It wouldn't be the TTC that goes on strike. I just want to remind people, if there is a job action, it's not us that's on strike. It would be the union that makes that decision. Mm-hmm. But we think we've got the room and the ability to negotiate that settlement, and we remain optimistic. I know I keep saying it, but we are.
And I know you can't say too much about negotiations.
Sure.
We wouldn't want to jeopardize that. But is there anything you can tell us about what still remains to be a sticking point at the table?
So, I think the union has outlined and articulated what their positions are. They've talked about things like wages, benefits, and the issue of service integration, which is something that we presented at our board in the last meeting in May. They've got some issues with that. So we continue to talk through that. Marvin spoke earlier about service integration, about other agencies crossing over and doing transit work in Toronto. But he seemed to forget that the TTC does transit work in other areas as well. We contract into areas like York Region, for example. So the service integration piece seems to be a sticking point. But we think there's enough room there to talk through these issues and work something out.
And also, Stuart, just quickly,
Sure.
over the years, there's been a lot of requests for more funding for infrastructure and upgrades to the TTC. But what about the employees, that human capital investment?
So there's no question that the frontline employees at the TTC who are doing that hard work every day are an essential part of what we do. There's no question. They work long hours, often in very difficult conditions. They don't often get treated very well, and it's really unfortunate. They deserve a fair deal, and we are committed to getting that fair deal for them, and making sure that there's no labor disruption and everybody is happy. That's where we want to be.
We know it's a busy time, so we appreciate you sitting down with us, Stuart Green with the TTC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon.
We are less than 12 hours away from that TTC strike deadline. We were just talking to Stuart about nearly 12,000 transit workers. They could walk off the job overnight if a deal isn't reached. Stay with us.
We're less than 12 hours away from a TTC strike deadline. Nearly 12,000 transit workers are set to walk off the job overnight if a deal is not reached. We were just joined right here on CP24 Live at noon with TTC spokesperson Stuart Green. We're going to have more of that conversation coming up.
One person is dead following a hit and run on Roncesvalles near Dundas. We'll tell you about what happened.
And Toronto is marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day with the ceremony at Coronation Park this hour.
Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at noon. I'm Lena Latifat.
Now, Bakari Savage, the union representing thousands of TTC workers, says that there's still plenty of work to be done at the bargaining table before a deal can be reached.
It also says members are ready to strike, and that would completely shut down transit as of tomorrow morning. Our Courtney Heels has been keeping a really close eye on negotiations, and she joins us live with the latest. So we just heard from the TTC, Courtney, saying that they're optimistic that talks are continuing, progressing well. The union, meantime, painting a really different picture.
Yeah, we're getting some different perspectives here, Lena, on how these talks are going. As you say, the TTC is saying they feel that they can still reach a deal here. And the union says they want a deal, too. But they say if they don't get a good enough offer here, they are going to walk. And really, the takeaway from their update earlier, they feel these talks aren't going well. What we heard from the ATU Local 113 president, they feel the talks are at an impasse, saying that there is a problem with the negotiating with TTC, saying they also feel the TTC is just not bargaining. They say they're making offers that come with strings attached when it comes to some of the major sticking points, the problems they see here, job security. They say they have concerns with what they feel the TTC is doing when it comes to contracting out work. And they have stressed if they don't get a better offer by midnight, that is the deadline the union is implementing here. They say they are going to walk off the job. So we'll let you hear from the union president on what the next steps will be here and what this strike action could look like.
What we will do is do the right thing in order to try to negotiate a deal. But if a deal is not in place by midnight, we will not be operating vehicles. We do have a framework in order to not have service cease immediately so that people can get home, right? Going up to the subway closures, but at the same time, you will not have reliable transit tomorrow.
So the TTC union saying if they do go on strike, there will be no service. So that means if you rely on the TTC to get to work, to get to school, if you hop on the bus, the subway, we know a lot of people take a number of different transit agencies to get to work and school. Well, that won't be an option tomorrow morning. The impact is going to be significant. And that's why so many people are watching for an update on these negotiations so closely. So earlier today, there was this update from the union. You really get the sense they feel as though they're frustrated, and they're saying they're leaving this message on the table here. If we don't get a better deal, we will walk. They are talking as we speak right now, guys. In fact, just after the update for the media, the president went behind me and down this hallway here to go and continue those talks with the TTC. So we'll see what happens here. But in the meantime, many of us are on standby waiting to see what is going to happen and if and when this strike will be called. Over to you.
All right. All eyes on this. Courtney Heels reporting live. Thank you, Courtney. Meantime, the federal government says the union representing border employees needs to meet in the middle to avert a strike. Mediated negotiations between the two sides still ongoing as that 4 p.m. Friday deadline continues to loom. The federal government says it is prepared to make concessions, but says there needs to be movement on both sides. Despite a vast majority of frontline border services officers being labeled essential, a work to rule action would still cause disruptions at the border.
And police are investigating a fatal hit and run in the West End. This happened around 5:15 this morning on Roncesvalles near Dundas. Paramedics say that one person was pronounced dead right there at the scene. And police say that the victim is a male, but no word on how old he is. Stay with us for the latest.
A Canadian ceremony was held at Juno Beach in France today to mark D-Day. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was joined by the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister of France. The trio attended the Juno Beach Centre, which is a permanent memorial to the Canadians who served in the Second World War, and laid wreaths of remembrance on the beach. There were multiple performances by Canadian singers and bands, as well as youth speeches.
To win the war, the Allied High Command decided that the coast of Normandy would be the target of the amphibious assault on the continent. Canadian infantry and armored troops were assigned a landing zone of their own, right here at Juno Beach. It was a testament to the esteem held for Canadian soldiers that a country with such a relatively small population would be given such an important role in Operation Overlord. And Canadians proved up to the task.
The commitment to service displayed by Canadian troops is a great testament to the strength of the people of Canada. Canada and the UK continue to stand side by side, as we did in 1944, just as strong together 80 years later. Ensuring the memory of those who fought for freedom lives on is why we've come together again today, to say thank you. Thank you for our freedom, and thank you for your service.
Prime Minister Trudeau spent time with each of the 13 surviving Second World War veterans who made the journey to France for D-Day. The oldest veteran at the ceremony is 104 years old. 381 Canadian soldiers died on the first day of the invasion in Normandy.
Prior to the ceremony, there was a spectacular display from the Canadian Armed Forces parachute team, the Skyhawks. They landed on Juno Beach to applause from the crowd. And this is a live look at Coronation Park this hour, where Toronto is marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day with a ceremony. A number of dignitaries, veterans, their families, and the mayor in attendance, paying tribute to the many Canadian soldiers who served on behalf of Canada. That's a live look.
Today marks 3 years since 4 members of the Afzaal family were run down by a now convicted terrorist. Members of the London Muslim community are hosting several events, including a vigil this evening. An event will include community leaders and special guests who will share words of encouragement and healing. Michael Ford, Minister of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, issued a statement saying, quote, "We honor the memory of Salman Afzaal and his wife, Medea Salman, their young daughter, Yumna, and her grandmother, Talat Afzaal. And today and every day, we condemn all forms of hate."
Dozens are dead after an Israeli strike hit a school sheltering displaced families in Gaza overnight. Palestinian health officials say at least 33 people were killed, including 23 women and children. Israel says several Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists who took part in the October 7th attack had embedded themselves inside the school. The IDF also claims it took steps to reduce the risk of harm to civilians before the strike, including conducting aerial surveillance. Israel's facing mounting international pressure to limit civilian bloodshed in the war.
Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, we're going to take a closer look at a study on the impact of the Gardiner construction.
Welcome back. The union representing Ontario high school teachers released the results of a survey on violence against school staff today.
1/3 of permanent teachers witnessed an attempt of physical force against another staff person. These are not just statistics. It's a stark reflection of the reality facing education workers and teachers every single day in Ontario.
School systems and districts are struggling to recruit and retain not just educators, but again, a range of education workers that support our students, and particularly our students in need. The issue of workplace violence is exacerbating already untenable working conditions and schools' ability to recruit and retain qualified staff. And so this is what we're hearing from members. So in their words, I'm going to share with you 2 quotes of what we heard from members in focus groups. We feel unseen. We feel unheard. We are subject to physical violence and verbal threats on a daily basis. We're dealing with psychological issues. We don't feel safe. We are frustrated and experiencing high burnout.
The union is calling on the Ford government to provide emergency safe school funding, saying the province has a contingency fund of more than $1 billion that could cover it.
All right, it's 12:43, 23 degrees. Let's get a check on the lunch hour rush with Adjua and Sia Yabwa. Adj.
Yeah, it's a slow go, Bakari, out there on the major routes. We have a couple of problems sprinkled in the mix. We'll start with problems worth a mention. So this is on the QEW Niagara bound, just past the 427. Stall off to the side, but we do have those MTO crews in the right lane, and there's a bit of a delay from the 427. Now, major delays happening on the southbound 404 DVP. They start south of Finch, and they don't ease off until south of Don Mills. And if you didn't know why, you're just finding out it's a slow-moving grass-cutting crew. They've been there since about 10:30 this morning, and they are literally just cutting blades of grass. That's what it feels like. That's how slow they are. If you're making your way through the area, avoid this stretch. Use Don Mills. You will save so much time. And at least the 401 now checking in problem-free, but it's a busy go as you make your way across the top of the city. Outside of camera view, crews on scene of a collision on Runnymede and Dundas. I'll send it back to you.
The CP24 traffic report is brought to you by CapitalDirect.ca.
All right, so after that traffic report, a study of the impact of the Gardiner Rehabilitation Project on commercial traffic, it's revealed a staggering increase in travel times.
And this is no surprise. Oakville-based Geotab Intelligent Transportation Systems used AI, GPS, and an onboard technology to gather this data. Those numbers indicate a whopping 250% increase in westbound travel times during the morning rush and up to 230% during the afternoon rush. There is also the environmental impact. Vehicle emissions are also up 23%. The mayor says they've already made a few changes in order to speed up construction, and they're looking at ways to do more to alleviate gridlock.
We are doing everything we can, including 24/7. We are speeding up the construction. We open up the ramp, so it's now better. I think that study might have been done prior to the ramp being open. Also, we are bringing outside experts to look at ways in technology that can smooth the traffic. So give us a couple of weeks to see some additional ways to ease the congestion on the Gardiner.
And for a closer look at this, we're joined live by Maddie Semiatiki, Professor of Geography and Planning and Director of the Infrastructure Institute at the University of Toronto. Maddie, first off, what is your reaction to this? You know, increased commute times by up to 250%, and then there's also the effect on the environment.
Bakari, this feels like Groundhog Day, you and I having this conversation over and over and over again. The congestion is terrible. This study confirms what everyone who uses that highway knows. Since the construction started, it's only gotten worse. The traffic is terrible. The gridlock, the backups are awful. People are experiencing it. It's belching out pollution that's ruining our air, creating particulate matter that's terrible for our lungs. This is just all around bad. And it's nice to hear the mayor talking about speeding up congestion, coming up with real solutions for the construction. We need to move this project faster because it's radiating outwards. It's now not only on the Gardiner, but it's radiating outwards to all of the routes alongside there too. So this is confirming, I think, what people have already known.
I was just going to say that I think these numbers confirm what so many of us have known for weeks now, that drive on the Gardiner and around the Gardiner is simply horrendous. Do you believe the mayor and city officials when they say they're working on it, they're trying to make this better? Is that good enough?
I think they're trying, and I think the line that jumped out at me was external experts. I'd like to hear more about what they're coming in to do. Are there ways of using off-site construction that can then be trucked in later? Are there different methods? 24-hour construction is good, but I don't think that's going to get this sped up as much as is needed given the impact and the cost. But I do think the mayor is trying. This is a contract that's been in place for some time. It's hard to come in late in the day. Once a project is underway, it's hard to make changes and it's going to be costly. But it's good to hear that there are plans in place and they're working at it intentionally.
Okay, Maddie, what about this? What about the added stress that's being put on these side roads as more and more people take that to avoid the Gardiner? But then you also have, larger trucks, 18-wheelers, sharing these smaller roads with cars as well.
That jumped out at me too. This is a real impact. It's not just on the highways anymore. It's on the adjacent roads. And some of those are neighborhood streets. So you have larger trucks. They're also now belching out pollutants and particulates, which get into lungs and cause all sorts of health impacts. So I think this is just a reminder of how important our transportation infrastructure is, how important it is to keep maintaining it throughout its entire lifespan, that it's not just you build it and then set it and forget it. This has to be maintained over the lifespan, and we're now dealing with infrastructure that's 50 and 60 years old, that's worn down, and is now in a state of repair that it does need intensive action.
Okay, now for the big question, Maddie. 1.3 million riders rely on the TTC each and every workday. If a strike happens tomorrow, many are saying that would be disastrous for traffic in this city. How do you see this playing out?
Like everyone else, it will be terrible. I feel like Captain Obvious today, but it will be terrible. Millions of people use public transit, 1.3 million every day. And without public transit, that's what we're trying to encourage people as an alternative. If the roads are gummed up, if there's traffic and if there's construction everywhere, take public transit, especially our routes that are off-road or in dedicated lanes. If that is out of service, it's just going to make things worse. And I think at this point, we really need both sides to come to the table, come up with a negotiated resolution here that keeps transit moving and enables the city to continue to operate.
So I'm looking at this from the perspective of the mayor or anybody who's involved in city planning. How much pressure does this put on the employer, in this case the TTC, to actually get a deal done? Because many are saying, we don't know what we're going to do with the Gardiner closures and traffic being such a nightmare. How would this even work out? Does it put pressure on both sides to get to an agreement quicker?
This is the nature of negotiations. You often see it come down to the wire. You often hear things negotiated a little bit through the press to try to ramp up the pressure, try to get to a deal. And that's really where we're at now. This needs to be all hands on deck. This needs to be everyone recognizing that without a deal, this really will reflect on everyone involved. And the city needs to be put first. The residents who have been through so much, the downtown core, which is struggling to recover, people across the city trying to get to their jobs, get to school, get to appointments. This really, they need to put residents first, the users first, Torontonians first, and come up with a solution that works for everyone and keeps the city moving.
Okay, Maddie Simonticki, professor of geography and planning and director of the Infrastructure Institute at the University of Toronto. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Maddie. And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, today is Bike to Work Day, but you might need to get to work on two wheels tomorrow if there is a TTC strike. Stay with us. Hundreds of cyclists made their way to City Hall today on the annual Bike to Work Day.
Mayor Olivia Chow, as well as other members of City Council, they all took part in the event. That's part of Bike Month. Cyclists joined at 4 different starting points on the ride to Nathan Phillips Square. This is where they gathered for coffee and pancakes.
Right now in downtown, there are bike lanes almost everywhere, almost, which means that the car driver knows where they are, and so does the cyclist. So it makes it safer for everybody.
Yeah, it's great. It's good to be part of such a big group, biking down to City Hall, and I'd actually never used a bike share before, and so that was an exciting thing for me, to figure that out.
I've been riding for many years, and it's always been challenging. There's more opportunities now than there ever was, more lanes, more spaces, but there's also more construction, it seems, than ever, and more closures, and we have to get better at some of those temporary closures to make it safer.
The city has added separated bike lanes on major streets in the last few years, including University Avenue and a large stretch of Bloor.
Well, CP24 Breakfast got a sneak peek at what some of the performances are going to sound like at Do Fest. It's happening this weekend.
Vou mergulhar no orgasmo tão puro desse teu prazer. Seu envolvimento que atrai momento pra acontecer.
All right, this is going to be the 11th festival in the heart of Little Portugal. It runs along Dundas Street from Mossington to Lansdowne, and visitors can expect a lot of amazing food, music, arts, and pop-ups, all a part of Due West Fest.
Yeah, Due West West, always fest, always a good time. That's a tongue twister. Thanks for watching CP24 Live at Noon.